Attention class, it's me, Mr. Goulbert speaking. Our last lesson was made, well, let's see, 1 year ago, in 9 days. So we have lots to cover from the syllabus. But you know the drill, I slave away making educational videos for my stupid university. But I thought I'd at least try to get a bit of watch time from it. Warning, these videos are the least bit entertaining and span multiple semesters and quality. Depending on the video, you can directly tell the level at which I want to put a gun in my fucking mouth.
In 1985, Disney released a sequel to the immensely classic 30s film, The Wizard of Oz. Due to the over 4-decade gap, the studio was able to use updated technology, as well as budget, to adapt the more fantastical elements of Baum's original Oz series. Compared to the 1939 original, Return to Oz takes a greater focus on world building and explores a darker tone compared to the more theatrical original. In taking a deeper look at the film, I'll analyze how Return to Oz, despite its quirks, is made up of many of the building blocks that make up a traditional fantasy story. To clarify, the film is not a sequel in the traditional sense, sharing none of the original actors and a radically different visual style, most obviously having Dorothy actually played by a child instead of an overworked Judy Garland. This is because the film is more focused on adapting the Baum Oz novels, not shying away from the weirder elements of the series' mythos. So the film acts as both a sequel as well as a fresh adaptation. Still, the film picks off shortly after the events of the '39 film, with Dorothy returning to Kansas after a romp around Emerald City, wherein our first part of the fantasy structure takes place, bondage, including wrongness and thinning. There's no short of wrongness within this film. While in the real world, Dorothy senses that there's bad stuff going on for her friends, that turns out to be quite the understatement as we find out the world of Oz is in a decrepit state compared to when Dorothy last saw it. The Emerald City has been mysteriously laid to waste, all of Dorothy's friends turned into stone. Even the iconic yellow brick road has been torn out from the ground, being a clear example of wrongness. The world of Oz is found in almost a post-apocalyptic state. This corresponds to the real world as well. Importantly, and different from all the works that we've studied in class, the Oz universe operates on a primary and secondary world, having the real world and the fantastical world of Oz, which Dorothy and other characters cross into, having a different set of rules than the primary world. This two-world structure is not uncommon in fantasy, most famously in Alice in Wonderland, which predates the Oz novels. However, there's more symbolic crossover in Oz, with the world often embodying or representing people and places in the real world, albeit distorted. Thus, the wrongness and thinning in the Oz is also happening in Kansas. We see this in Dorothy's farm being totaled by the tornado from the first film, with her father's injury causing the family to be low on money, this working as the thinning for the film. Sort of like Quoth, this also applies to Dorothy's mental state, succumbing to a deep depression after leaving Oz. Thus, her family decides to send her to a mental ward so she can receive electric shock therapy. This, as well as restoring the Emerald City, is the main bondage for Dorothy. Luckily, there is a dreadful storm and nearly everyone dies, so Dorothy once again finds herself in the secondary world. Character-wise, well, kind of odd, this still follows a formula. Dorothy's pretty standard for a hero, plucky, competent, and seen as important by the other characters in the film. Interestingly, in an example of mythopoesis, Dorothy's name has since become myth, with many characters recognizing her as the girl who once took down the Wicked Witch of the West. Instead of Toto, we have a talking chicken named Bellina. She's essentially a comic relief sidekick, but more importantly, she functions as a fresh face that Dorothy can explain the world to, giving easy exposition to the audience. In terms of a conventional guide figure, there's TikTok. No, not the website, who's a wind-up warrior and the last to witness the downfall of Oz. However, he's got a few screws loose himself, his mind and body shutting down to be rewinded every time. Still, he's Dorothy's strongest ally in the story, taking on any foe. To round out the cast, there's Pumpkinhead Jack, who acts as a bumbling sidekick, but is actually at the heart of the story, conveying the emotional weight of what's going on. Lastly, on the hero side, there's the Gump, this green moose guy, which is both a character and a vehicle. Gump is one of the rare polders in the film, with the characters just barely escaping to the sky to have a moment of respite. There are two major antagonists within the film, both working beside each other for dominance of Oz. This would be the Gnome King, who has stolen the emeralds back from the city to hoard all for himself, also capturing the Scarecrow, wanting to keep people as artifacts in his great collection. He's very much like a Smaug or a King Haggard, motivated by greed, a pretty standard fantasy villain motivation. his real-world counterpart being the doctor who wants to operate on Dorothy, stealing all her memories. However, I would not say he's the Dark Lord character. That's more in line for Princess Mombi. In reality, being a cruel nurse, Mombi is an evil lady who steals the heads of women and then wears them for herself, having a grand collection. She first acts as a trustable source to Dorothy, playing on fairy tale motifs just as the original did with witches and wizards. Mombi is a more threatening foe than the Gnome King, wanting to take Dorothy's head. This goes into the oddly bleak tone of the film. In scale of more childhood fantasy like The Last Unicorn and The Hobbit to more adult fantasy like Game of Thrones in the last season, Return to Oz is definitely more towards the Hobbit camp. However, the film has many moments that would be horrifying for children, like Mombi or the Wheelers, these bizarre clown creatures which roll around, or the Deadly Desert, which if you have the misfortune of touching, you get turned into sand. Thematically, the film is about ruin and degradation. It's very sad, very scary, yet still for children. In that way, it's kind of comparable to the Mouse Guard series, where it's difficult to place who would really be its audience. Throughout the film, Dorothy goes through many trials as a hero would, taking on the Wheelers, just saved by TikTok, having to confront Mombi alone in her head collection, and finally the Gnome King's riddle, where he has her have to guess which object the Scarecrow has been turned into. Many of these moments, much like Bilbo being separated from Gandalf, has Dorothy go it alone, her friends losing their guesses and being turned into statues in the last scene. This is the moment of eucatastrophe where it seems all hope is lost, with Dorothy unable to guess which one is the Scarecrow, until she comes under the sudden realization that everything from the Emerald City has been turned green. So she finds the Scarecrow and rescues all her friends. Thus we have healing, where the world of Oz returns to its natural state, the Emerald City is restored, and all of Dorothy's friends are back together again. However, in this moment there's also recognition. Dorothy wants to stay, having no one to protect her friends, but at the same time her true place is in Kansas. Here we have the character change, or a sort of splitting, introducing Ozma of Oz, a sort of counterpart to Dorothy, seen throughout the film. She's rescued and vows to act as a queen of the Emerald City, so essentially Dorothy's metamorphosis has her split metaphorically into two girls, one occupying Oz and the other living back in Kansas, which has also been through healing, the asylum destroyed and Dorothy's family once again gaining the motivation to restore the farm and get things back on track. Both short films, despite being different tonally and aesthetically, share a combined perspective of troubled youths, one a killer, the other a pervert. Both films utilize visual storytelling to build an understanding and almost sympathy for these corrupted boys. Heads up, I'll probably end up butchering most of these Polish names, so kinda bear with me. First, in the case of Jack, in a short film about killing, we watch him as he drifts from place to place before committing the murder. Through the use of lighting and shadows, we see the best and worst of him. We see his tender but still childish side, when he flings food to entertain two girls watching from the other side of a window. As odd as scenes like this are, they depict Jack as almost playful, contrasted against scenes where he scares the pigeon away from the old crone. One scene using his childish disrupting nature to both disrupt and delight different people. This shows a sort of duality for Jack, to pick a certain road, to either be an upstanding citizen or a delinquent runaway. He's shown to have a tenderness towards children, like viewing a caricature artist draw a little girl, or viewing an art mural in the middle of town, or the already mentioned diner scene. All these moments are given new meaning at the end of the film, where Jack reveals to Peter that he had a little sister who had passed away, which he feels partly responsible for. This being the main reason he ran away from home and partly inspired the murder. In all these cases, girls are being immortalized, one through her portrait by the artist, one by having her image displayed on an exhibit, and the last trying to leave a mark on the diner window. This goes along with what Jack says at the photographer's office, asking if a photo can tell you whether a person is dead or not, showing an unconscious wish to keep his sister alive. This is the opposite case for the victim taxi driver Walderman, who has a connection towards children, but more so as a sexual predator. He takes enjoyment from harassing animals, however this is not played the same way as Jack causing trouble. Walderman comes off far more sinister despite being the victim of the film's second murder. He is coded in the first scene to be even evil, admitting he hates cats, coding him with the opening title of the film with a dead cat, the first of 3 stranglings. These scenes being nearly back to back, makes it seem that it was possible that he was responsible for the cat's death. And then we see him try to creep on Bitka, making the audience almost root or be less concerned for his death at the hands of Jack, despite how brutal and obviously deplorable it is. As Jack decides to murder Walderman, the scene depicts him in shadow, conveying that he's been almost possessed by a dark passenger, a looming evil that drove him to commit the act. The film leaves us unsure if we believe Jack is morally good or evil, leaving him as morally gray. Quickly moving over to the case of Tomek in a short film about love, his character can be read under the lens of psychoanalysis, most prominently Freud's infamous Oedipus complex, which dictates that young boys have an unconscious desire to kill their fathers and marry their mothers. Tomek, a young adult abandoned by his parents, lives with his godmother. In his free time, he obsessively watches the older and sexually active lady who lives across from him. The fact that he was abandoned causes him great trauma, turning him into a social recluse, only having one friend who is also shown to be a pervert. It's obvious that in watching Magda, he is trying to have her act as a replacement for her mother figure. However, he does this unconsciously. When Magda asks why he's been stalking her, he responds that he doesn't know what he wants. It's more a compulsive desire to watch her, and to hear her voice. He also, with this, starts a rivalry with her other suitors, who take on a fatherly role in this metaphor, calling the gasman to help check her stove to interrupt their relationship, causing one of their suitors to become impotent and leave. Then later, this exact suitor challenges Tomek only for him to lose, showing he's unable to first castrate the father figure. Another visual cue is the repeated image of milk. Tomek gets a second job as a milkman to become closer to Magda, in one scene watching her spread milk across her table in distress. The milk being visually coded towards maternal figures, as milk is what mothers naturally use to feed their young, using this in a more perverted and uncomfortable context. In both Lim Ramsey's We Need to Talk About Kevin, as well as Sean Baker's The Florida Project, we are shown depictions of childhood delinquency. However, while Mooney and Kevin are both troublesome youths, the difference comes in their upbringing. While Mooney's delinquency makes sense due to the rough environment she grew up in, it is clear she still has a kind heart. Kevin, on the other hand, was born to luxury and seemed to be provided everything a child should be, yet he grows up to be a psychopathic mass murderer. This brings along a conversation of nature versus nurture, shining light on their two respective caregivers, Ava and Haley. I'll begin with Mooney and her mother, Haley. While it may be hard to get a sense of Mooney's overall morality compared to Kevin, as we only see her as a 6-year-old girl, still early in her developmental journey, still we can study her current behavior. She is immediately shown to cause trouble with her friends, spitting on Stacy's car and swearing at her when she comes out to investigate. While this is not really all that severe, it still shows a willingness to cause trouble at a young age. There are multiple scenes like this, notably where they trash an abandoned house and semi-accidentally burn down the entire building. It would thus be easy to say that Mooney and her friends are showing signs of becoming delinquents growing up. This is likely due more to her surroundings than a biological nature. To prove this, I'll base my claims off the Maslow hierarchy of needs, a scale judging one's conditions towards happiness and self-fulfillment theorized by psychologists Abraham Maslow. While the top of the triangle depicts deeper and more abstract needs, the bottom is actually quite simple, asking if the subject meets physiological and safety conditions such as easy access to food, shelter, and water. And already due to Haley's financial qualms, you run into issues with the first two, as they can barely make ends meet, living in a hotel room on a technical loophole, allowing her to have full illegal residence there. They survive mainly off of handouts and occasional scams run by Haley, until the free Denny's breakfasts dry up in the second half and she has to resort to illegal prostitution. Thus, the first and most basic step is already rocky, the second being safety, and the first problem kind of blends into the next. Even if Haley is shown to be decently protective, their low-income housing is still riddled with crime and danger. It could also be argued that Mooney is also endangered by her lack of another parental figure. However, there are a few surrogates, with Ashley and later Grandma Stacy taking care of Mooney along with their kids. This could also apply to hotel manager Bobby, since he acts as a sort of protector to the two girls in many other scenes. Still, Mooney lacks another parental figure, especially one that acts like an actual adult. The next two levels only really apply when the first two basic steps are met, so even if I were to prove Mooney had a lot of social connection and esteem, it doesn't really register when you're 6. She does get a lot of support from a lot of the people around her, although that could be challenged when she is taken by Child Protective Services at the end of the film, suggesting that she will be separated from the only person who truly understands her. With her upbringings established, you can easily track where this behavior is coming from, being learned from the adults around her, specifically her mother. Mooney's rebellious and outspoken nature is shared by Haley, who defies the law and has outbursts towards people who challenge her. To get along, she manipulates and scams hardworking people, towing the line between the legal and illegal to get cash. One could say that she also neglects Mooney, especially towards the third act when she's bringing men over while her daughter waits in the bathroom. However, Haley still clearly loves her daughter, trying to give her the best experiences she can on their price range, showing maternal affection. Thus we get to see a lot of Mooney's good qualities, like her respect and love towards her friends, and trust to her mother. While trashing the abandoned house, we can see this duality, as Mooney dreams of having a house herself one day, picturing a better life. In conclusion, Mooney's delinquent qualities are a result of her upbringing as well as her best qualities, rather than any biological reasons. Now on to Kevin. We spend a lot more time with the boy across various ages compared to Mooney, who we only see at age 6. As well, Kevin's behavior and disobedience is far more extreme, especially by the end of the film. Still, there's comparisons to be made in both children's behavior, like emotional outbursts, lack of respect towards authority figures, love of destruction, and general manipulation to get what they want. In Kevin's case, this behavior is more situational. He acts completely fine around his father Franklin, hiding his true nature to make Ava seem insane. So most of his behavior is targeted against his mother, who he intentionally tortures with his actions. Financially, the two families are far different. Bringing back the Maslow triangle, Kevin meets essentially every step. Ava's job as a travel writer has allowed their family to have a stable income, with an expensive house and plenty of food, meeting all the criteria for the first as well as the second tier. Apart from Kevin himself, his life is pretty safe, having stable security with both a loving father and mother, who can nurse him back to health when he's sick or otherwise. Although I guess it could be considered that Kevin is sort of a danger to himself, as well as Ava's occasional abusive outbursts. Relationship-wise, Kevin is provided with love from his father, younger sister, and attempts from Ava. However, Kevin does not seem to feel the love he is being offered, hurting the people he loved the most. This goes further for achievement, wherein the boy is definitely talented, showing a proficiency in archery, computer skills, and just general knowledge. However, it is not clear whether Kevin appreciates his reputation and respect from people other than his mother. Thus presents the odd part about his case, where all conditions of the Maslow triangle have seemingly been met, though Kevin is incredibly antisocial and still rebellious. His behavior is not caused by his surroundings then, rather from something biological. Kevin shows pretty extreme signs of an antisocial personality disorder, a mental condition often developed in early childhood, exhibiting behaviors such as a lack of empathy towards others, as well as a lack of guilt or ability to connect with peers or loved ones. Typically, this disorder results in criminal activity or general violence towards the people and animals, with aggression towards pets being an early indication towards the condition, as well as destruction of property or emotional manipulation. Now, like most mental illnesses, it can be caused by genetics or developed through trauma. The other option is that it's genetic, a gene passed down by a close family member perhaps. Though we cannot really prove this, as there's no mention of any ancestor suffering from ASPD in the film. Another reason could be during her pregnancy, Ava had been drinking. Studies show a correlation between even the smallest amount of prenatal alcohol exposure heightening the risk of adolescent disorders such as anxiety, depression, or even ASPD, meaning Kevin's behavior and disorder is most likely a result of Ava's alcohol consumption. In conclusion, both films provide an example of childhood disobedience, both using two different sides of a debate, with nurture in Mooney's case and nature in Kevin's case. However, the question is never that simple, as both biological and environmental factors often result in childhood disobedience.
Alright people, this is our ad. Just take it in for a moment. It really jumped out to me immediately because of all the cigarettes I smoke all the time, so just really internalize it, keep it in your brain as I say all the stuff we wrote, okay? The addresser of this ad is Cool Cigarettes. It targets mainly higher-end smokers, just like how Rolex sells an image more than they sell watches. Cool Cigarettes advertise their product as a high-brand one that makes consumers feel a sense of belonging. In cinematography, very little is left to chance. This is the same for advertisements. In this cool cigarettes ad, the choice of colors is intentional. Gold symbolizes luxury, success, royalty, and fortune. Black, however, represents elegance, wealth, and power. Brands like Versace and Lamborghini use gold in their logos, whereas equally high-class brands such as Chanel or Louis Vuitton have black logos. Pairing these two colors together immediately sends a message to the addressee. Subconsciously, people who view this ad will associate these concepts to the product. That Cool Lux cigarettes are like the champagne of smokes. When we first look at the picture, we see the world in the context of this lady with lipstick and lack of clothing, which automatically makes us think of sex, one of the most common and effective selling points in media. The brand uses provocative imagery to address a certain audience, ones who might consider themselves to be playboys or stud muffins or what have you. Then we look at the text. The font pairs well with the words used, intense indulgence. But if you look at the font used for intense, it's a way more serious one, whereas indulgence uses a more of a playful or promiscuous one. The different lettering is also intentional. With the two words that are placed over the advert, the fonts mirror the words and their meaning with the advertisement. Intense is spaced out in this bold, capitalized font, which is then contrasted with the smooth, ornate, and artistic font, speaking to an indulgence. The picture's main function comes from being emotive/expressive. People do not automatically relate to the image, but most can recognize an emotion deriving from looking at it, whether that's desire, lust, discomfort, or perhaps the craving to fit in or be cool. In the top left corner, we see the Cool Lux logo, with bolded gold letters in the font used by luxury brands such as Gucci or Louis Vuitton, who have already made their name in the industry with universally known products associated with luxury. The name Cool Lux speaks for itself. Let's do some easy math right here. Cool equals cool, and lux equals luxury. The company is not hiding the fact that this product is supposed to be associated with being cool or luxurious. Finally, there is the juxtaposition of the surgeon's general warning. There is no fancy font, no emotion, or any sense in the message in the ad. It feels as much as legal obligatory medical subtext as possible, almost to the point where it is placed away from the product. Our attention is subverted from the legal surgeon's general warning, as it is cast off and not nearly as emphasized, so we can all smoke until we die. Ray Bradbury's dystopian novel, Fahrenheit 451, is one of the author's most famous pieces, a cornerstone in the English school curriculum after being released in the early 50s with a film adaptation produced in the late 60s. Nearly 70 years after the release of the novel, it came time for Hollywood to adapt the story once again, now with the challenge of tackling a modern audience. The studio's method was to greatly alter the original novel's plot and use commonplace tropes from other popular contemporary media in order to appeal to a modern audience. One of the larger omissions from the film is Montag's wife Mildred, who acted as a representation of how an individual has had their life transformed by technology. The novel is widely regarded for being quite prophetic with its vision of the future, especially with Mildred's dependence with walls of screens, which one could easily draw comparisons to social media. Of course, the film has the benefit of being released in the time Bradbury could only predict. For whatever reason, Mildred was left out of the film, being replaced with an AI acting as a sort of wife to Montag.
What's wrong, Montag?
Nothing.
Your vitals have been off recently. I'm going to reconfigure your cocktail and have new drops delivered.
That's fine.
This is clearly a comment on how recent invention has blurred the line between human and AI. This is not an original idea, however, as it's been depicted in such works as Blade Runner 2049, with Ryan Gosling's character dating a holographic commercialized woman whom he treats as a real person, ending with his arc realizing and coming to terms with the fact that she is a product, making him question his own importance as a replicant. Or the 2014 film Her, which focuses on the drama of a man falling in love with a computer program. The overuse of this convention works in the film to easily signal the viewers to make that connection. Apart from those who have been completely omitted, there are plenty of characters that were changed to the extent that they share few similarities with their textual counterparts. For example, Clarice in the novel is the catalyst to the entire story, with her pure curiosity inspiring Montag to question life beyond what he is told by the government. However, her actual textual presence is quite shallow, as she is killed halfway through. Despite her importance, she is also not a completely complex character, serving her role as a simple, complete force of innocence and childlike curiosity,
To make her more complex in the adaptation, she was made to have conflicting beliefs, working for both the underground resistance and the antagonist government out of her own need, having the audience question her motives. As well, it makes the narrative feel more stark, removing one of the remaining bright lights found in this dystopia. Additionally, she is aged up to be Montag's love interest, displaying a clear-cut affection for the character over the simple admiration Montag had for her in the original. Audiences tend to prefer depictions of romantic relationships, as it raises the stakes of the narrative, heightening the drama from a cinematic perspective. She was not the only character to be written to be darker. The resistance group was changed significantly as well. In the novel, their description should be easily compared to that of hippies, with them accepting Montag almost immediately to join them from his pure knowledge of books. They are shown essentially telling stories by the fire with the optimistic belief that they'll one day reform society. The film takes a different approach by introducing them as a force to be reckoned with. They essentially kidnap and then interrogate Montag. They make Montag perform a grueling task before accepting him into the group, showing them to be far more aggressive in their beliefs compared to the cool bunch of hippies in the novel. They could easily be compared to the hard-edged resistant teams in films like The Matrix, who are ready to fight the establishment. This more action-focused depiction excites the audience and makes it feel that there's more weight to the decision, given the strong will of the group's members. Despite these significant changes, the film mainly stays on track with the plot of events in the first two acts. However, the last act barely resembles the novel's ending chapters. In the novel, Montag escapes from the city, unable to rescue most of the books he was carrying, escaping to the small group of readers still left, ending with the bittersweet sentiment that he may not be able to change the world now, but will fight for his message to one day change the future. While a realistic and nuanced ending, it does not have the same clear goal and easily satisfying conclusion viewers have been taught to expect in every film. This was rectified by the creation of the flash drive, containing every book ever written, placed inside of a holographic phoenix. Not only playing with the imagery of the knowledge rising from the ashes like a phoenix, but also essentially making the books a MacGuffin for the characters to chase. This makes the end goal more immediately understandable, comparable to that of the Infinity Gauntlet at the end of Avengers Endgame. However, Montag does die at the end of the battle, keeping the edge of the adaptation still there, allowing them to have their cake and eat it too. In conclusion, Fahrenheit 451 makes itself clear that it is trying to modernize the original classics with aspects of popular media today, though while it achieves a wider audience, it runs the risk of turning away original viewers who enjoyed the quiet nuances of the original story. Apparently, their acts of wider appeal backfired as the film was met with highly critical reviews from critics and general audiences alike. In 1932, writer Aldous Huxley published his novel Brave New World, describing a dystopian city wherein society is under the tight control of their government. 2 decades later, Ray Bradbury released his dystopian novel, Fahrenheit 451, which similarly focused on society under control of their government. Both of these novels, as well as dystopias in general, usually work to predict or even warn readers of how technology or society may advance. However, these two novels come from very different perspectives. Brave New World was released still in the height of the Great Depression, while Fahrenheit was released post-World War II. In just 2 decades, technology and world politics had changed drastically. Curiously, I wanted to analyze the two fictional worlds together to find similarities and differences to see how these two writers depicted the future. Firstly, the most obvious difference between the two futures is the span of their technological upgrade. Oddly enough, the more recent Fahrenheit's advancements seem quaint compared to Brave New World. Sure, there's huge flat-screen TVs, essentially AirPods, and robot dogs, which we all have more or less a version of today, but people still ride around in cars and still have families. Huxley went way ahead in his vision of the future, however, where people mainly transport through helicopters and genetic reproduction has advanced to the point where it is unheard of to have a birth mother or father. This also lies the difference in how the governments enact control, this process being the focus and conflict of the both novels. Brave New World society has everything controlled from birth. People already have their futures planned for them and are modded to perform this skill. They are then taught the government's beliefs and morals through state-governed Pavlovian association tactics. The example we see in the novel is a scene of babies being given books and flowers, only then to scare and shock the children, teaching them to avoid both. This is not the case in Fahrenheit 451. Instead, the government uses strong legislation and fear tactics to keep their citizens in check. Mainly the firefighting squad, which is the main focus of the book, with their job to burn any and all books they find. Therein lies the main commonality between the two governments, both particularly targeting literature and forbid citizens from reading them. This is because books allow for free thinking, often allowing one to find a personal identity or a belief system. Furthermore, both societies are kept docile and unquestioning further in adulthood, through different tactics. In Brave New World, the drug soma is widely administered to the people, introduced as a replacement for spirituality and religion. These soma pills brighten up the mood and slow the brain of anyone who takes it, as such is the main response to anyone who is feeling down, such as Bernard, who is often offered the drug by Leanna to calm his nerves. Whereas in Fahrenheit, there is a greater focus on the media being the distraction, mainly through the television, which keeps people docile. Television was only becoming commercially popular in the 50s, meaning most did not know the effects that would take place later in the future, meaning Bradbury was likely commenting on this. As such, in the novel, we see the TV's effects through Montag's wife Myrtle, who is obsessed with her TV friends being the talk show host on her TV wall. We see her live an apathetic life, lacking any meaning to the point where she commonly accidentally overdoses on her sleeping pills, showing her lack of personal care, mirroring the death of Linda later in Brave New World. Education on history is also vastly different between the two novels. In Brave New World, the director and other scientists talk of our customs such as religion and natural birth. However, they are described as ancient and almost archaic, like how we would think of past civilizations like the Mesopotamians. While in Fahrenheit, most of the history has been erased or changed to fit the agenda. Like, for example, firefighters putting out fire is actually seen as a myth in the novel. In destroying books, it further eliminates free thinking, as people are not allowed to learn of the mistakes of the past. Additionally, other cultures are hidden from the public, as wars and other conflicts are hinted to be going on without the general public having any idea, culminating in the city being destroyed. On the other hand, in Brave New World, travel and exploring other countries is completely supported, as it benefits the travel industry. However, most do not end up enjoying the customs of the other culture due to their programming, and end up preferring home with nothing learned. In both novels, we are shown very few who think against the system that they're in. In Fahrenheit, we're introduced to a little girl named Clarice who still values things such as reading, going on nature walks, or just being plain curious. Her personality actually inspires Montag to stop firefighting and pursue knowledge in books. In Brave New World, however, most of the world's government has a tighter grasp over its citizens. While most people are brainwashed to be happy despite how terrible their condition is, there are some outliers such as Bernard Marx who is unhappy living a life of passionless romance and hobbies. In showing signs, he is then threatened by the director to be sent to Iceland for simply being unhappy and causing a fuss. As such, most outliers come from a different culture entirely, like John the Savage. Just as Bernard is threatened to be sent to Iceland, Montag is also warned to give up the possession of the books or be hunted down by his own firefighter brigade, both dealing with the grave consequences just from wanting a break from the norm. Beyond government interference, a lot of free thinking is destroyed by the citizens themselves. In Fahrenheit, Montag wishes to prove a book's worth to Myrtle and her friends, only for them to break down and report him, causing the manhunt after him. They are too content living in their lifestyle and media conditioning that they react with disdain towards any challenging idea. The same is true for Brave New World, as Bernard's different opinions make him an outcast, creating the rumor that he is accidentally given a drop of alcohol, meaning he was genetically not to belong with the other alphas. This shows how easily governments can get citizens to turn against each other. As such, both novels have pretty grim endings, with Fahrenheit City being destroyed in war, yet there's still a sliver of hope for a new world to be birthed from the ashes when Montag joins a group of book preservers. Sadly, such is not the case for Brave New World, wherein John hangs himself out of the shame of the world he inhabits. In conclusion, both novels show how corrupt governments can easily alter the freedom of their people through technology to the point where most don't even know they're trapped.
Imagine, if you will, you're entering a window that is scary, a window into another world, perhaps even. We take you to a farm in Maine, where a lowly scarecrow stands in a field, beyond his days and questioning his purpose. Ah, jeez, here comes another one.
Nevermore.
What was the line again? Oh yeah. Be gone from this domain of grain, you feathered heathen, or beware, you'll be in for a scare.
Why should I be scared of you, chicken shit?
Ah, come on, man, that's uncalled for.
Sophomore year of high school, you shit yourself in front of the entire class.
I did not shit my pants.
It was during a straw man debate. Everyone saw it.
Well, how would you know that, you stupid crow? Not that it happened, of course, I'm just saying.
Even Jenny Appleton, she saw your blue overalls turn brown.
Jenny?
Even under all of it, she still liked you. But you never got the courage to say anything to her.
What? There's just no way this is possible. I mean, she didn't even look at me.
You got the smear and patches, but you're never able to express your feelings.
Well, because I can, Mr. Crow. No one sticks by me long enough.
Why don't you practice on me?
Well, alright. Mr. Crow, despite your crass behavior, you have taught me something valuable. I admire your presence and was wondering, would you want to hang out sometime and have some wonderful grain?
Commitment. Fuck off, you goddamn loser. You fucking piece of shit. I never want to see you again for the rest of my...
Oh, there he goes.
Good job there, Patches. You really showed him flying firm and what's what.
Gee, thanks, Farmer Brown. Oh. After all, this story isn't possible because scarecrows don't actually exist. And wasn't that a cool story, guys? Next up, some dumb ugly dwarf on a plane or something. I don't fucking know. Hey guys, it's me, John. This song is about an embarrassing story where I forgot the words to a famous song. It's a real classic, so sing it with me if you know it, folks. Beer. White wine. Also, there was this one time in high school I was in the computer lab with a girl I had a crush on, and some other girl recognized me from middle school and she walked up to me and said, "Hey, you're herpes kid," because one time in gym class I had a cold sore. She then explained to everyone, called me herpes kid in middle school, and then I wanted to kill myself. Fireball.
What happens if the engine stops? We all freeze and die.
In this sequence of Snowpiercer, the mise-en-scène juxtaposes the abattoir and the classroom, exposing how both environments process and dehumanize the body as tools. The abattoir is stark and industrial, dim light metal surfaces, carcasses hanging in orderly rows. Its silence and emptiness emphasize bodies reduced to objects. The classroom, in contrast, bursts with noise and color. Bright drawings cover desks, children chatter, and fluorescent lights fill the room. The costuming is reminiscent of early white suburban America, especially the teacher in her floral dress. She is wearing a rather large prosthetic pregnancy bump, hinting that she herself has, in a way, signed her body to produce more power for the engine, using the aesthetic of Western conservatism to convey childhood brainwashing. At first, it feels cheerful and safe, yet this warmth conceals its function, disciplining children into ideological obedience.
Old world people were frigging morons who got turned into popsicles.
Both spaces organize bodies for the system, one through overt brutality, the other through disguised indoctrination. By contrasting cold silence with lively noise, dull metal with bright colors, Bong Joon-ho shows how control operates not only through violence, but also through comfort.
Welcome to Captain Kelly's Chicken, home of the new chicken shake. What can I get you today?
Chicken shake?
One chicken shake. Anything else?
No, I don't want a chicken shake. I was just asking, what is it?
In science fiction, advertising is more than just background decoration. It's a technology that shapes desire, behavior, and identity. Across the science fiction genre, ads often expose the deeper anxieties of our psyche, fears about surveillance, consumerism, militarization, or the erasure of autonomy. But Strawberry Mansion pushes this trope further. It takes one of the most intimate human spaces, our dreams, and takes it to the final frontier of capitalist extraction. Much like the omnipresent media commercials in RoboCop or the upbeat propaganda of Starship Troopers, Strawberry Mansion uses advertising as a formal device to communicate its central science fiction theme, that capitalism evolves until it consumes everything, even the unconscious. The film imagines a world where dreams can be taxed, recorded, and monetized. This is a future where advertising is no longer something you encounter, it's something implanted directly into you. From the moment we see James Preble enter Bella's home, the film displays a world shaped entirely by commercial logic. Preble's job of auditing dreams for undeclared purchases shows that advertising is not only persuasive, it is enforceable. Dreams are data, and data is capital. Through this premise, the film uses the familiar language of bureaucracy and consumer tracking to express a distinctly dystopian anxiety. If capitalism can reach the subconscious, then the last human refuge has disappeared. The mise-en-scène of Preble's early dream sequences reflect this intrusion. Artificially bright colors, cheap mascot characters, and fast food product placements that interrupt the flow of his unconscious. The ads are not surreal or symbolic, they're literal. They look like the kind of disposable commercials we already scroll past, a choice that makes them uncanny. Science fiction often uses futuristic technology to convey its themes, but here the technology feels especially mundane. The horror is not even the dream recording helmet itself, but that even inside our dreams, the advertisements are boringly recognizable. This echoes the way Blade Runner uses giant holographic billboards to show a world drowning in corporate spectacle, or how Back to the Future 2 uses 3D pop-up ads to exaggerate the noise of consumer access. But in Strawberry Mansion, advertising surrounds and colonizes the characters. It weaponizes loneliness and routine, exploiting gaps in emotional life to sell a narrative of constant consumption. In the 2017 sequel to Blade Runner, these themes are expanded on, with Tyrell's original android becoming commercially widespread to the point that artificial relationships are almost as accessible as fast food. This takes the form of quickly accessible sexual companionship. Sex appeal, of course, has always been a functioning marketing tactic. However, Blade Runner takes this to another level, creating a symbiotic relationship where citizens cannot tell the difference between artificial and true attachment. One of the most striking techniques Strawberry Mansion uses is how the tone shifts when ads appear. The sound design becomes louder, more abrasive, almost sticky. The pacing interrupts itself. The camera lingers too long on brightly colored food, or cuts too quickly between smiling mascots. These breaks in tone feel like glitches in the emotional fabric of the scene. Advertising becomes a form of cognitive violence. It is an assault on the coherence of the self. This connects to the broader tradition of science fiction using advertising to critique systemic power. RoboCop's satirical newscasts normalize military escalation. This is shown especially in its performance. The jury hosts empty positivity, transitioning between public unrest and violence. The RoboCop itself is a metaphor of privatized police going commercial, with government law enforcement being used by tech companies to showcase product usage, earning them higher capital. They rush out products without the concern of public safety to further notoriety and publicity on their product. Starship Troopers uses propaganda commercials to encourage enlistment, targeting even young children, turning death into a form of entertainment. Even the film Repo Man turns the alien into a commodity, stored like a product inside of the trunk of a Chevrolet Malibu. The alien car becomes the main desire of the film's characters, with the ending having the protagonist choose it over unconditional love and happiness. In each case, advertising is not just messaging, it's world building. It tells the audience what society believes, what it fears, and what it willingly hides. Strawberry Mansion ultimately argues that capitalism's final stage is psychic colonization. By using dream advertising as a science fiction device, the film visualizes a theme that could not be expressed through realism alone. The idea that mechanisms of power don't merely act on the body or the public sphere, but on the imagination. And by giving us Bella's hand-painted tapes, a relic of unmonetized dreams. The film suggests that creativity and human connection are the only forms of resistance left. Liminal spaces, in strict definition, is an in-between space, passed through without much thought. Hallways, airports, staircases. The aesthetic definition of liminality, though, requires mise-en-scène to evoke a certain feeling, which, like liminality itself, is a sort of in-between of unease and nostalgia. Liminal spaces take familiar setting, and then remove context from the frame. People, furniture, clutter, leaving us with the uncanny scaffolding of familiarity, but evoking eeriness and slight estrangement, embodying the duality of Freud's Hamlet, both familiar and strange. A grocery store at night, an empty swimming pool, a children's playground without the children. All are familiar sights, estranged only by removing the image from its context, crowded in the daylight. Then simply flood the frame with hypnotic lighting and negative space, and you've got yourself a bona fide dreamscape of limitless horror. The term liminal, which comes from a Latin word limen, means threshold, and describes the middle stage of a rite of passage that suspends normal identity. Liminal spaces are the cornerstone of eerie dream sequences or dreamlike atmosphere precisely because they deal directly with this threshold of reality and illusion, destabilizing identity through disorientation. But what exactly makes these spaces so terrifying? First and most foremost is the way they make us linger on places we usually pass through unthinkingly. Airports, hallways, staircases are transitionary spaces, so when the camera locks in on the frame, characters become stuck in the middle of this transition, suspended in a void of unstable identity. In films about adolescence, liminal spaces push characters to the brink of adulthood without letting them really cross the threshold, and so they're frozen in a limbo between childhood and adulthood. The longer they intrude on these liminal thresholds, the stronger their crisis of their suspended identity becomes. I saw The TV Glow as the most striking example of this, a coming-of-age horror which uses liminal space to allegorize the embodied claustrophobia of trans repression. As protagonist Owen lingers in liminal suburbs, he struggles to suppress his real duality and make the psychological and physical transition to embrace his real self, and his identity starts to feel fragmented and illusory. The mise-en-scène in these liminal spaces is a perfect representation of the dream logic that warps physical time and space. In Suspiria, the distorted space reflects the disjoint of adolescence, where the blown-up setting dwarves Susie in size, and in the vivid hallway she's forced to reach up for the doorknobs like a child. Argento's original plan to write the characters as children fragments their identity, as their adult bodies contend with the script and setting created for children, creating a jarring experience. In the setting of Sarah's escape in the back rooms, a window leads to another room full of razor wire, two details that make no sense within the physical space. The characters are trapped in the in-between of liminal space, which is distorted become threatening. In It Follows, time becomes liminal. If you look at the technology, the older CRT televisions, the odd shell phone in the modern cars, it's difficult to pin down the temporal setting, even to the decade. Even the season can't be specified, as characters wear jackets outdoors in one scene and swimmer the next. The inescapability of liminal spaces in these movies is horrifying, because it works directly against the idea of natural movement of transitional space. And if you can't even move through the liminal space, what awaits you on the other side, when you find yourself stuck in a liminal space in horror? Then the characters must face the conflict. Do you linger in the threshold, where you fester, repress guilt, and let yourself fragment, or do you try to escape, to move behind the curtain, into the hallway, into what horrors may lurk in the negative space? Freudian theory on dreams and on the uncanny both dwell on repression of childhood anxiety. The uncanny is a confirmation of childhood superstition, which has thus been subdued, and the dream manifest feelings of guilt and shame censored by the ego. Many liminal spaces play with childhood nostalgia in their aesthetic. The living room that somehow looks to everyone like the house we grew up in, the McDonald's play place long discarded. But the nostalgia turns sinister when these liminal spaces meet dreams, where the manifested content of the dream twists the innocence of childhood space to bring guilt and shame to the surface. In It Follows, nostalgia for childhood is poisoned by these liminal spaces, as these settings become a threat to the characters. In Suspiria, the enchanting Snow White-inspired Technicolor quickly swaps nostalgia for trauma, as girls hang dead in pools of bright red blood. In It Follows, after Jay encounters the entity, the playground should be a retreat to innocence, but the negative space represents a threat lurking just out of view. The swimming pool, likewise, is slowly poisoned as the water stops representing safety and innocence after Jay has had sex with Hugh and contracts the curse. The childlike spaces Jay reaches for after the encounter turn liminal because she is no longer a child. These spaces betray her the longer she seeks sanctuary in them, lingering to avoid crossing the threshold into adulthood. As the threshold between realities, it's not surprising that horror movies dwell uncomfortably in liminal spaces, as a genre that is always actively working to dissolve binary understandings of humanity. Fisher talks about liminal Lynchian spaces in his essay on visual narrative, saying David Lynch's films are built on precisely this ruptured temporality, where characters become trapped in loops of memory, regret, and dreamlike distortions of time. In a striking example of the liminal space's inescapability, Dale Cooper literally becomes trapped in the Red Room, a dreamscape waiting room where time is disjointed, by his doppelganger, who takes Cooper's place in the real world, completely dissolving the binary between dream and waking, the reality and illusion, the human and non-human. In I Saw the TV Glow, a decidedly Lynchian film, protagonist Owen grapples with the suspicion that he and his favorite character Isabel on fictional TV show The Pink Opaque are one and the same person, and he struggles to imagine that he himself may be a doppelganger, and she being the real person inside of him. In Suspiria, even before Susie crosses the threshold of the doors into the Dance Academy dreamscape, we may notice the eeriness of the doors that are just a bit too small, and the sign that should be German rather than in English. Does she really pass from the waking to the dreamscape, or is the opening a kind of illusion? This is the nightmare of inescapability of the liminal space. How do we know we're really dreaming? And how do we know if we've woken up?
It was a dream. We live inside a dream.
And it's raining post-toasties.
Alright, now that no one is surely listening, I have a confession to make. I'm sure everyone was aware of the situation that happened last year in September. You know, the whole situation in Utah. Well, someone was convicted of the crime, but I have to admit that it was actually me who was behind the whole thing. You see, I was actually on campus on that day. That's right, I confess. I was the one who stole the school's Willie the Wolverine costume. I stole it to have gay furry sex with my boy toy. I'm just so glad I could get this off my chest, and I'm deeply sorry, and I hope the authorities can forgive me.